All righty, everybody ready to go? Okay.
1 minute.
1 minute.
Right on time.
You're the shepherd, Paul or John?
I got to pay attention to her. I always get the last two words. Yes, dear. Good afternoon. I'm Don.
I'm Suzy.
And we are the Campbells. You got to do whatever you do. Anyway, we just moved into Paradise Valley back in November. We had a visit before that, sometime before that. And the McNamara's, who most of you probably know, told us that life at PVE was kind of like being on a cruise ship, but without the water. Okay, so Suzy said, well, she could throw a bucket of salt water on me anytime to just complete the experience if I needed it. And that clinched it. So we bought and moved here just a couple months later. Now this presentation is about the 10 years that we spent traveling the world as guest lecturers on cruise ships. Most of the years we sailed about 6 months or more a year. We visited all 7 continents and we went to some 160 countries. Now what led us to get into that particular sweet deal? Well, ahoy!
Ahoy!
I can't hear you.
Ahoy!
All right. Now my interest in all things nautical began when I was very young. After high school, I accepted an appointment to the United States Coast Guard Academy, and all the cadets there train on the U.S. Coast Guard Cutter Eagle that you see here. Now that little red dot that just bounced down there was my sail station. You can also see a picture of the Eagle here on the back wall of the club here at PVE. Today the Eagle is still home ported at the Academy in New London, Connecticut. It's an active commissioned bark. It's used to train future officers. She sails all around the globe, training men and women in the basics of seamanship, navigation, and leadership. For the next 24 years I spent in the Coast Guard, where I had a variety of assignments, including commands of both ships and shore stations. Oh, by the way, ahoy in sailor talk was how sailors got the attention of other people when they were out at sea. My wife still calls out ahoy when she really wants to get my attention.
Ahoy, Don. Get back to our story.
10 years ago, we were on a vacation cruise with some friends when I went to a presentation about maritime history, and it was awful. I was really disappointed. I inquired how to become a speaker. We were given contact information for an agent, and we both applied. Well, after an extended vetting period, which included checking the world's most wanted fugitive list and things like that, we received an email inviting us to meet the Tahitian princess in Papeete, French Polynesia. The email is all we had for travel documents. I mean, other than our normal passports and stuff like that. Ever the fearless, though, we bought one-way tickets to Tahiti. Well, the French officials, they weren't big on that. They questioned us because we didn't have a return ticket off of the island. They finally relented and they allowed us onto the island, and a couple of days later we boarded the Tahitian princess and we were hooked. Well, one of us was, the other was seasick. We soon learned that life aboard a cruise ship can be fun and sometimes challenging. It does take a little getting used to living in a 100 square foot room with a small bathroom and very limited closet and storage space. Most of the time our room was a small passenger cabin, guest cabin, just like this one. On our first sail from Tahiti, though, we were assigned to a crew room with bunk beds. And when you were in that one, the bathroom was so small, when you were seated on the toilet, your feet were in the shower. Oh, and that reminds me, there was a man and a woman. They had never met before, and they were assigned to the same room on an overnight ferry going from Stockholm to Helsinki. Now, finding that there were no other accommodations that could be made, they agreed that, hey, they were both mature professionals and they could get around that man-woman thing, you know. So they decided they'd go ahead and share the room. The man, being a gentleman, he took the upper berth and the woman was in the lower berth. Well, in the middle of the night, the man leaned over out of the upper berth and he woke up the woman and he said, "Excuse me, it's quite cold. could you get me another blanket? She looked up at him with a little glint in her eye and she said, I have a better idea. Just for tonight, why don't we pretend we're husband and wife? Well, this guy was thrilled. He went, whoa, okay. And she said, get your own blanket. On the cruise from Tahiti, we sailed across the Pacific Ocean with a stop at Pitcairn Island. That's the sole British overseas territory in the South Pacific. You can kind of remember that because that's the island where Fletcher Christian fled after dumping Captain Bligh in the mutiny on the Bounty story. When we were there, it was kind of a rough day, so they wouldn't launch the tenders from the ship to take us onto the island. So the locals came out in their boat to get to our ship to get some supplies. They also shared some memories and some handicrafts, and as well as some stories. The island has a small health clinic, very small health clinic, and it's in the town called Adamstown. That's the only town on the island, by the way. It has dental equipment and an x-ray machine and some emergency medication. It's not equipped to deal for any major problems, and that may require waiting for days for a passing ship to go by to evacuate the patient to a medical facility. Now, when the mayor was out there, we asked him, what happens if someone has a heart attack on the island? He shrugged his shoulders and said, that's what our cemetery is for. The town can only be reached by climbing the newly paved Hill of Difficulty, a wonderful road. Today's Pitcairn Islanders, now this is not a new picture, this is an older picture. They're all descended mostly from the 9 Bounty mutineers and the Tahitians who accompanied them. There are approximately 50 permanent residents on the island today, and they all originated from just 4 main families. You can see Betty Christian's cookbook. She's one of the descendants of Fletcher Christian. That's back there on the table. We made a little display for people to look at. She traced her family tree in the back of that cookbook. It's kind of interesting. Our next stop on that first working cruise was at Easter Island, where we saw the moai carvings, and they were made by the Rapa Nui people out of basalt rock. They're giant heads that most of you are probably familiar with. They were carved sometime between 1250 and 1500 AD. Recent findings, though, suggest that the giant statues were there to mark the whereabouts of fresh water. We sailed from there on to Chile, Peru, Ecuador, Panama, Colombia, and some of the Caribbean islands before we landed in Florida. Well, our reputation soon led us to being invited to speak directly by the cruise lines rather than making our arrangements through an agent. And soon we were asked to be destination lecturers rather than just maritime history speakers. Eventually we would sail Princess, Royal Caribbean, Holland America, Azamara, Norwegian, Oceania, Crystal, and Regent lines. And we were also honored to be named Smithsonian approved lecturers. And we were sometimes booked as much as 2 years in advance. Now, while we had the pick of our own itineraries, we preferred to schedule them back to back, sometimes back to back to back to back, to avoid some of the dreaded airline travel. And while it was coach seats that the lines would include in our lecture agreement, we would generally upgrade to first class when we could with our own frequent flyer miles. Now, these are just a few of the many interesting painted bollards that are on display in Geelong, Australia. So if you ever get down under, it's kind of a neat little town. Most of the time, though, we chose to be at sea for 4 to 6 months at a time. One year, we were asked to remain on board as another one of the speakers was ill, and the result that year was 10.5 months at sea. While not paid in cash, our volunteer work did give us the equivalent of hundreds of thousands of dollars of cruise time. On board, I enjoyed the pottery wheel and golf shots off the stern of the ship, while Suzy, she luxuriated in the spa. We were considered half crew, half guest, and as such, we had access to things like the gym, the pool, the casino, the library, and the medical center. In return, we, well, mostly me, gave lectures to the guests at the rate of one 45-minute lecture per day at sea. We, well, mostly Suzy, wrote these things while we were at home, or while we were at sea also, but basically she did all the writing. We had rehearsals with friends and family, and we kind of likened ourselves to the Rick Steves of the senior set. As destination lecturers, we presented history, culture, the places to go when on shore, and the things to buy. One time we told a story about the Okinawan shisha, or the Chinese guard lions. They come in all sizes, they're small to real big. Now the local families place pairs of these things on the rooftops or the front entrance of the house guarding the gates. Some believe that the female has her mouth open to share the goodness. And the male reminds the man to keep his mouth shut. Now that did start a mass frenzy ashore when the ship's guests were out buying these things, because they were buying them up as fast as they could find them. I guess Suzy and I should have bought stock in them, because had we known the influence we were going to have on the market, we might have made a little bit of money. And oh yeah, we have a pair of these in our bedroom. Some of my favorite excursions involve going to maritime museums around the world. Shown here is one that was in Western Australia that we particularly enjoyed. Now we considered ourselves to be edutainment. That's educating and entertaining. And as enrichment speakers, we talked about maritime history, geology, and other special interests. Most of the photographs we used throughout all of these talks are our own. We presented history, culture, and go-to places covering the stops on the various itineraries as destination speakers. And they liked us. So we kept getting excellent scores, continued interest from the cruise lines who wanted to book us. Now, some of the challenges of living on board for months at a time were things like getting flu shots and prescription medications and visas. On one of our trips, Suzy couldn't get a last-minute Indian visa, and so she had to stay on the ship. Good thing, we'd been there several times before, and she'd already seen Dobie Ghat, the local laundry. Of course, I got a little trouble because I reminded her how good she had it. Back home, we had to keep the car batteries charged and provide for the upkeep of our property. We had a support staff of such, and the internet. We set all of our income and expenses to be processed automatically, and we even bought 2 houses while we were out of the country. I ended up becoming, I guess, a specialist of sorts on the Panama Canal after having sailed through it some 17 times. In 2014, I was asked to lecture about it again, and this time it was around the 100th anniversary of the building of the canal. There was a lot of fireworks and fanfare, helicopters flying all around, and many dignitaries from around the world. It was also the time of the grand opening of the canal's new, larger set of locks. We didn't get to go through the expanded locks, and it's doubtful that any cruise ship in sailing today would ever experience them. The new locks will only be used for very, very large cargo ships with a lot of money tied to them. Now, there's also a lot of laughs that happen at sea. One time a guest asked me, "How does the crew get to work in the morning?" Oh, I couldn't resist. I told her that they came to work on a very large helicopter very early in the morning every day, and they returned home every night on that helicopter. A few days later, the ship arrived in South Africa. Now, the harbor pilot arrived by helicopter at about 5 o'clock in the morning. As luck would have it, the same guests told our boss, the cruise director, to get that crew helicopter fixed because the noise woke her up that morning. Then there were other questions, things like, if I take this elevator up to the cafe, how do I get back down? Or, where does the ship plug in to get its electricity and internet?
Ahoy, move forward.
We entered a shipbuilding contest and won it on our first voyage, but when they found out that my undergrad degree was in naval engineering, I became a judge. The captain and officers and myself would score the passengers on their handiwork. Now, beside lectures, I had the opportunity to be part of a panel on the Liars Club game. Passengers formed groups or teams that voted on which of the panelists were telling the truth about the definition of a little-known word. The panel was usually the cruise director, sometimes the captain or some of the other officers, and myself. And we kind of hope we're going to be able to play that here at PVE sometime. We think that might be fun. There were many dining venues on the ships. The everyday crystal and fine china set main restaurant where you could eat a 6-course meal every day. We're kind of foodies, and we've been to some of the very top restaurants around the world. We could eat at all the specialty restaurants on board, and this usually included a fine steakhouse, French and Italian restaurants. There was even an Asian fusion place where you could eat all the sushi that you wanted. On board ship, food was an art form, with various cruise lines always competing to win the award of the best cuisine. Many of the lines featured dishes from world-renowned chefs, and Oceania ships featured Jacques Pepin, both his recipes, and sometimes he would join us on a cruise. Even lunchtime on board brought the taste and sights to behold. How about a potato waffle with steamed asparagus, black truffle cream, and wilted spinach? Now don't get too hungry yet. Dinner doesn't start for a while. And there was a taste of the world's foods at lunch, and this is a Swedish sampler. We started out eating healthy. Notice, muffin, grapefruit, fruit. That lasted till about 4 o'clock, tea time. Every day there were those cute little sandwiches with the crust cut off, and lots of cookies, cakes, pies, calling to us, mostly to her. Sometimes it was an all-chocolate tea or just cupcakes. Teas were held on the top deck of the ship, and they had incredible views out of the sea as we sailed along. And usually there was a string quartet playing nearby. On long cruises, there was also a gala tea that was in the main dining room, and the pastry chefs always really went out all out. Often the executive chef would go ashore and bring fresh fish back to ship to be displayed and custom cooked that night in the most amazing ways. This is French Polynesian night. Ethnic foods were featured at the buffet, and that also gave us a chance to go native. And yes, that is a long dress that I'm wearing. We ate caviar by the bowls full, roasted suckling pig, and Maine lobster fresh cooked on the grill or in specialty dishes served nearly every night. There was a Waldorf salad with tiny peanut butter and jelly eclairs made to look like little hot dogs. Outrageous bread displays at the Italian specialty restaurant with olive oil and balsamic vinegar carts sent around for you to choose your own special dipping preference.
My turn. So let's talk food. Okay. Here we go. The carved food displays on the ships were so cute that we wanted to take them home with us. I'm sure those of you that have sailed have seen what magical artistic displays they can come up with all made of food. Nearly every diet could be accommodated on the ships, as well as for special occasions. After my DNA results came back and said I was Ashkenazi, I started going to the Jewish services and meals, something else to eat. The Christmas holidays were no exception. Cookies were available all around the ship, as well as panettone bread, that's my favorite, stollen, and ginger snaps. And as I said, it always pays to make friends with the pastry chef. There's an Easter tradition in my family, and I can only admit to you guys because I've been here a few months and I've met most of you, but the tradition was to be celebrated on board just to keep the family satisfied that it was being carried on. But it had to be accomplished without prying eyes. I bit the ears off a chocolate bunny. Well, I didn't get caught. Everyone guessed it was me. I wonder how they figured that out. The rumors flew around the ship. That meant I had to finish it myself. Oh, darn. While we are emboldened to eat our way around the world, we exercise some, but not a lot of precautions. Local restaurants and street food, we were equal opportunity eaters. On the left is dim sum in Beijing, and on the right in Vietnam. Neither of us got sick until we traveled to Cuba, where I ate a cheese sandwich at Havana Airport and ended up in the hospital for pancreatitis. Another of our favorite trips was spending a week with the Maasai Mara, and that's a tribe in Kenya, and you may be familiar with them. They're the ones that are known for their long legs and they jump up and down. Well, the reason they're jumping up and down is whoever jumps the highest gets their pick of the girls. Well, they fixed us sundowners, which was cocktails and appetizers set up on the trail with beautiful sunsets. Our guides spoke good English and were eager to share that their parents actually chose their wives for them. I said wives, plural. The women made the huts, and they built them from scratch, just of mud and dung with a grass top. The women had to build it. The United Nations listed the Maasai cow bleeding ceremony as an endangered cultural ritual to be preserved for humanity. Now, ever the sociologist, I wanted to see what this was all about. And if any of you are squeamish, I suggest
Close your eyes.
close your eyes or something, I don't know. Okay, the local tribe agreed to perform it just for us. Normally only practiced for special occasions like birth, marriage, or death. It consists of bleeding a cow and drinking its blood. I had the honor of choosing the cow, which was slightly punctured at the jugular with a blunt arrow. Well, there were no cows injured because at the end it got up and ran right back to the herd and it was just fine. But anyway, ever the naturalist, I wanted to try it. After all, it couldn't get any fresher, could it? Wrong. By the time they passed around the still steaming mixture of blood, with added fresh milk to keep it from curdling, the container was covered with flies. It was the flies that bothered me. Okay, having to withhold my reputation, I agreed to try silkworms in South Korea. Oops, wrong again. They weren't very good.
All right, I'm back. Well, anyway, before we get too long, we previously had enjoyed Wiener Pulsenwagen in Copenhagen. That's for Ella. And that's where I ate my favorite hot dog. And there were French fries with gravy and cottage cheese in Quebec. And there they call it poutine. We had reindeer soup in Finland along with reindeer stew, reindeer meatballs, reindeer roasts, reindeer everything. And we ate warthog in Namibia. Oh, okay, they weren't like that. They were cooked first. Yummy was the word for the Belgian waffles and chocolates. We ate the waffles in Brussels across the street from a famous little boy statue fountain. You can imagine what the little boy is doing. Tired of cruising the red light district, we went on a food excursion in Amsterdam. I loved the food cart where they had the raw marinated herring. It was really awesome. That walking tour took us to little-known holes in the wall that were pretty much local favorites. There was cheese, salami, yogurt, and cookie shops, among others. We ended up in Amsterdam's oldest pub. And I got to tell you, I don't remember why she was smelling the beer. Y'all know what durian is? It's named in some regions as the king of fruits. It is distinctive for its very large size, very strong odor, and thorn-covered rind. The smell evokes reactions from kind of deep appreciation to intense disgust. That's my end of the equation. It has been described variously. The smell is rotten onions, turpentine, or even raw sewage. The persistence of its odors, which may linger for several days, has led to that fruit's banishment from most of the hotels and public transportation. Suzy had her first taste of durian fruit in the Chinatown area of Singapore. It was deep fried into a kind of like a custard. She was hooked. She bought it wherever she could, and she even ate it on the streets in Saigon, Vietnam, and at the floating market in Bangkok. There at the floating market, you could buy everything from shoes to puppets. We ate yummy haggis in Edinburgh. You know, that's the sheep stomach stuffed with a meat mixture. Now, I have to tell you, you can make it taste like meatloaf if you add enough ketchup. Now, this was at a place called Deacon Brody's Pub. Now, he was the person that Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde was based on. We ate Turkish Delight, or lokum, by the handful in Istanbul. And it's kind of like applets and kotlets, but they're dipped in powdered sugar. Lokum was originally made just for the sultans. We were hooked on it, so we wandered the Grand Bazaar looking for free samples of that candy all along the way, as well as exotic spices and carpets. While we were there, we bought some Iranian saffron and, of course, some handmade woven rugs. Suzy ate an ice cream sandwich on tricolor bread off a cart in Singapore. Don't ask me why they make a thing with bread, but anyway, that's what it was. And that was just across the park from the famous towers in Singapore that are, by the way, not to be confused with the towers of Kuala Lumpur. But we're not quite done eating our way around the world just yet. You know that special cup of coffee that you can pay upwards of $100 or more for in New York? Well, we drank it fresh from the source in Bali. The civet cat begins the process by eating the coffee beans. It goes through several stages, not the least of which is collecting the partially digested beans. Now, they do clean them, and then they roast them, and then they grind them, of course. Now, it does taste kind of like regular coffee. At least it did to us. It's called luwak, in case you want to go buy some. Now, noodles quickly became a go-to food for both of us, such as the Japanese udon, and there was also Chinese lo mein, and here it was being hand-thrown at a restaurant near the Terracotta Warriors in Xi'an. Now, we ran into a huge sandstorm from the Gobi Desert, and we had to wear masks. And that made it very, very hard for Suzy to eat her Angry Bird sucker that was made out of rice. We had a favorite restaurant in Cape Town, South Africa, where we became regulars pretty much every December for 5 years running. It was Ethiopian and named Addison Cape. On a round woven basket table, you're served on an injera pancake made from a special fermented flour. It's so big that it fits the whole table. And pieces of the bread are torn off, and they're used to gather up different stews such as lamb or lentil or carrots and spinach and collard greens, just to name a few. And again, Suzy was hooked. Oh, no, maybe it was just the homemade honey mead wine that she got into there. In the Gambia, we feasted at the chief's compound, having brought these children hand puppets that we made at home. And these were all his grandchildren, and probably half of them. That's not even near all of them. There were other barely edible foods that we ate, sometimes out of desperation. One example was this elegant first-class train food on the way to the Taj Mahal. And a McDonald's in Delhi, India, of course, served no beef. Our wildest adventure was to the western side of New Guinea to visit the Dani tribe. That was an undeveloped Indonesian side of the island. Now, we had a lecture gig to go around Australia, and we had arranged a side trip beforehand in early 2017. We flew into Wamena and then took a four-wheel drive up into the mountains. We hiked the rest of the way with a guide and a porter. They chewed betel nuts. It's a highly addictive product, particularly when dipped in limestone powder. Betel nut has a mild stimulant effect. Now, the local people chew it for stress reduction, heightened awareness, and the suppression of hunger. Oh yeah, it also rots your teeth, but hey. Now, it can be found on almost every corner in Papua New Guinea, and it's chewed as a part of social occasions as well as a part of just everyday life. Children as young as 6 begin to use it. Now, we had previously, here we go. We had previously seen the Danny tribe on a National
He
Geographic...
better give you the warning here. If anybody is going to find male or female nudity, now is your time
run out.
to close your eyes.
Anyway, we'd seen this on a National Geographic special, and the local fashion statement is a penis gourd with white mud on their legs and backside. Now, some of these tribes used to be cannibals. In fact, there's some pretty convincing evidence that they're the ones that ate Michael Rockefeller. So we bought some peace offerings. Here are children playing with some soap bubbles that we gave them. They wanted hard candy that they called gula gula, which simply means sugar, sugar. Now, the elders wanted cigarettes, and we didn't bring them. We learned that the women cut off their own fingers at the joint to mourn a death in the tribe. We brought a stone axe from there that was used for this purpose. You can see that also on the back, the table over there on the side. There's also a flesh picker that was used by cannibals in New Caledonia. That's probably more that you wanted to know, right? The Dani were really eager to kill a pig for us, and they would roast it in the ground with ferns and other vegetables. It was pretty succulent looking stuff. While it looked very succulent and very good, we pretty politely declined it. We opted just for the corn on the cob. Now, we knew that these people were, and maybe even in some cases still were, cannibals. And maybe if Suzy danced with them, they wouldn't notice. Now, I was kind of worried. What if it was kind of like the old Scheherazade and John the Baptist thing, and they put my head on a platter? Now, so she went off and she danced and repeatedly cried, wah, 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 which in Dani is, the Dani language is their word for welcome. So what's a 70-year-old woman dancing with near-naked men who don't speak English but put boar teeth through their noses? Enough of that. Now, they also had a 600-year-old mummy of a tribal elder that they were really quite proud of. Did I mention that these people were cannibals? Okay, enough about tribal customs and foods. Maybe it's time to move on. Traveling all around the world, we took every means of transportation we could, such as ziplining like monkeys through the rainforest in Costa Rica. Now, depending on the cruise line, we were required to pay for our own excursions, but we could choose to escort them and go for free. Our escort duties meant that we had to carry a first aid kit, and we had to fill out a form rating the quality of the excursion. We had to deal with things like, lost passengers and occasionally a broken wrist. You might have seen us riding camels in the Australian outback. And we dove underwater to an airplane wreck and a sunken bus in Aruba. We walked the Great Wall of China and actually sledded back down. We had fun in Reykjavik riding over ancient volcanic beds on their famous Icelandic horses. They have a fifth gate that's called a tolst. We rode in Cabo San Lucas, Mexico on Christmas Day while watching whales migrate to the Pacific Ocean. And we rode up from Petra in Jordan. Now, let's not forget our numerous elephant rides. The one shown here is in Ayutthaya, the ancient city of Bangkok. We joined parades in New York, and when our feet hurt, we went shopping for a new pair of shoes in Amsterdam. There were cooking schools on and off the ships, many taught by famous chefs. I attended a cooking school in Koh Samui, Thailand. To this day, I can still make a mean chicken satay with spicy peanut sauce and a pad thai noodle dish that's to die for. There were times we were kind of in danger, like when lava started spewing out of Mount Vesuvius in Italy. We went to Pompeii anyway. That's not me in the lower right. Some pirates disrupted our, Somali pirates disrupted our journey, but the scariest time of all was being hit by a rogue wave in the waters off Kiel, Germany. It did over $1 million worth of damage to the ship. But because it happened in the middle of the night, 2 o'clock in the morning, guests only suffered minor cuts and bruises. As I told Suzy, you won't melt if you get wet. You aren't made of sugar. We snorkeled around the world, including the Great Barrier Reef of Australia and in Maui. And Suzy danced with school children in Vietnam. We visited Dubai in the UAE and then went to the largest mosque in the world in Abu Dhabi. It was inlaid with precious stones, jade, lapis lazuli, garnets, and more. The women had to wear a full cover, but they provided the abayas so Suzy could go in. She had a sari made in India, complete with a bindi, and I took her to dinner that night at one of Mumbai's finest restaurants. We went around Africa several times and really got to know it quite well. Another UN cultural wonder we attended was a circumcision ceremony in Togo, West Africa. The haystacks danced while young boys hid to avoid the inevitable. Periodically, the haystacks would be turned over on their sides so children could see that there was no one inside. Oh, come on, how did they move then? Well, there was a secret compartment in the lining of the haystack where the man could hide away from the children. We went to a fetish market complete with a voodoo doctor. Fetishes to the locals meant a transitional object between them and their higher power, kind of like rosary beads, if you will. We bought a voodoo doll and had our choice of some bones of dead rats and bats and cats. So does anybody want a dead? No, we won't go there. The dead rat?
The voodoo doll, complete with
Voodoo doll's
nails,
over there.
can be seen over there.
We visited the tiny country of San Marino, completely surrounded by Italy, and ate, of course. Suzy bought a sweatshirt. It was so windy and cold, and you may see her wandering around here at PV with it on. In Namibia, we visited the Himba tribe. The women cover their bodies and hair with red ochre mixed with butter, and that protects them from the scorching sun. While they're not allowed to use water for washing, the women do take a daily smoke bath in order to maintain personal hygiene. The women cover themselves with a blanket so that the smoke gets trapped underneath the fabric. Amazingly, these people had no body odor. Then there was the Taj Mahal and the Red Fort in Agra, India. Stonehenge called to us, while the world's animals became our delight. The proboscis monkey in Brunei, they're the ones with the big nose. They kind of look like Jimmy Durante. In Namibia, there were geckos with transparent skin. We pet koalas and kangaroos in Australia. We saw the raw power of whales breaching near the ship and flying fish jumping in the waters off Vietnam. The little fishies gave Suzy a spa pedicure in Singapore. She said it tickled. Cruising the Amazon River, we saw pink dolphins and piranha. A whole lot of kissing was going on as well. I was kissed by a seal in Cabo. And I kissed the Blarney Stone in Ireland. Oh yeah. Suzy kissed a stingray in Bora Bora. A giraffe in Nairobi. Hey, it's my turn for a kiss. And she volunteered to pet a crocodile in the Gambia. We ended up visiting the Komodo dragons in Indonesia on 5 separate sailings. And I said, okay, that's enough of that. On one of the Falkland Islands, Suzy sat on the people side of a rope boundary at a penguin rookery. The youngsters really weren't shy in crossing the rope to see what she was all about. We realized that Suzy was sitting in penguin droppings, so she smelled just like one of them.
But I thought they liked me. They really, really liked me.
Well, I really liked the time you got your face painted on the beach in Madagascar to surprise me. Only somehow I wasn't surprised. We were a bit skeptical as to whether Hamish the cow, or Q as they say in Scotland, knew how big he was, so we went to Loch Ness in search of the monster. Apparently, Nessie was on strike that day. In Cuba, Suzy smoked cigars while I rode around in fancy cars. The Sydney Bridge and Opera House are iconic, so we spent New Year's Eve 1999 there. Australia called us back at least once a year. Suzy has cousins there that she never would have met had we not taken this cruise gig. There were other famous places in the world that we visited, and that one's not in Nevada. Many trips to Israel afforded us the chance to visit the holy sites. In Russia, we went to see the church on spilled blood in St. Petersburg. We escorted a group from the ship to a private Russian symphony concert at the Hermitage. Sitting among priceless works of art, we had to pinch ourselves as to how lucky we were. Let's just listen for a minute. That's enough of that.
Certainly not the quality to which I have become accustomed.
Then there was Xi'an, China, with the fabulous terracotta warriors. Now, do you know that there's no two faces out of all those hundreds and hundreds of statues that are alike? Myanmar, formerly known as Burma, quickly became one of our favorite places to visit, and shown here is the reclining Buddha in Yangon. The Shwedagon Pagoda in Yangon is where young children are presented at the temple in special costumes. Now, little boys and girls are left there to study with the monks for, about a week, depending on the child's age. And many of them, I guess you could say, were a little apprehensive. We went on many safaris in Africa. We saw the Big Five, known for being the most fierce on earth. Well, a water buffalo roamed. Yep, we were this close. We came around a little bend and he popped up out of the mud just as we came up to him in a four-wheel drive Jeep. We saw leopards and cheetahs hunting on the savannah and a snake that was 18 feet long. And we saw that at night using infrared light. And you can thank Suzy for me taking that picture out of here. We were up close and personal with penguins in Cape Town. I couldn't resist. We traveled from the northernmost point in Europe at North Cape in Norway, and then 30 miles south of that we hit the ice bar and then threw our ice glasses into the river. They don't pollute because they just melt. And Suzy had a nap on top of reindeer skin in an igloo. To the southernmost continent of Antarctica, and Iceberg Alley, where icebergs glowed a kind of a real beautiful blue against a gray sky. Okay, it's pretty much time to wind this up before she shouts, "Ahoy!" at me again. Now, over on the side table today, you'll find a few items that we collected on our travels, and that's for you to kind of look at if you have time. Be sure to look at the family tree in the back of Betty Christian's cookbook from Pitcairn. There's a stone axe from New Guinea that was used by the Dani women to cut their fingers off. There's a cannibal fork from New Caledonia, and a pair of ceramic shoes that were used in very early China to keep little feet from growing. There's two carved figures.
Not that exact pair.
Well,
they'd be priceless if it was the real deal.
I don't know. Anyway, there's also two carved figurines from an Amazon tribe in Brazil, a war club from Fiji, and a voodoo doll from Togo. That's complete with nails. So I don't know if that's to remind me of something or what, but anyway, that's there. And we'd appreciate you not putting your mouth on the didgeridoo from Australia. If any of this piqued your interest today, for the rest of 2019, we're going to be presenting the same talks that we gave on the cruise ships. And that'll happen every first and third Tuesday at 2 p.m. here in Rowlandson Hall as a part of the Lifetime Enrichment Series. You'll have the opportunity to learn about different countries, geology, foods, native tribes, and more. All kinds of different stuff. Our next presentation is going to be on February 5th. It's called Early Sea Travel. That's about the history of boats from logs to clipper ships. We throw in a few famous explorers and, of course, maybe occasionally a joke.
Don't forget the food.
We have food in that one?
I don't think so, but...
Oh, well, anyway. And that's the first of two lectures that we classify as maritime history. So and the rest of them get into places and other things. So come and relive your travels. Learn a little different things about the world in which we live. Now, we got time, a little bit of time. It's almost dinner time, but we have time for a few questions if you have them.
I'm hungry.
And we'd also like privately afterwards, if you want to get together, was to talk about your travels. And thank you for your gift of time. Yeah. Yeah, there was an error someplace, I don't remember where it was. It was the second and fourth. It's been changed to the first and third Tuesdays.
Thanks, Georgia.
At 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Yes, sir.
Is that durian fruit the same one we used to call jackfruit?
Is that durian fruit the same as jack? No, it's related. And the two of them, if you cut them open and let them sit for a while, they get pretty ripe.
The jackfruit is just a little bit larger. The durian's like that. The jackfruit's much bigger, and it really doesn't smell or taste quite as strongly as the durian. But you haven't lived till you've tried real ripe durian.
All right,
Questions?
well,
Questions? Anybody have
last
questions?
question. Yes, ma'am. The one I'm on at that time. That's a safe answer. She asked, what out of all the cruise ships we were on, what was the one we preferred most? Basically, each cruise line and each cruise ship has things in its favor. And depending on what your particular taste and preferences are, you find the one you like, and, it's kind of like, I don't remember, but you find the one you're with, and that's the one you love. And that's the way it works. We did have some favorite lines and some favorite ships, mostly because we got to know a lot of the staffs, the crew, and a lot of the guests, the repeat guests, were awesome, and we really enjoyed it. It was a way of life that we just never could have imagined, 12 years ago. So.
Until we got to PVE.
Yeah.
I haven't been in Cape in 50 years. Did they have horses in there, or did you ride in through the door?
Oh, at Petra?
Yeah.
Petra, you walk down through the Long Gorge. He wanted to know how do you get into Petra. There's this kind of a canyon that goes from the upper level. You walk down. You could ride down on a horse, but you walk down through the thing, and it's kind of interesting because as you get near to where the historical sites are in Petra itself, you kind of walk through an opening in this canyon, and all of a sudden it just opens up in front of you. It's absolutely spectacular. And then when you're coming back up, it's a long, hot walk back up. But you could always do like she did and ride a pony.
Well, and I think John was asking, did they have the horses down, down by the treasury is where I caught that one.
All righty, well, thank you very much. Oh, wait a minute, one more. Yes. In fact, the Azamara, the two Azamara ships, the Journey and I don't remember the other one, those were originally part of the Renaissance line. Azamara got them. Princess got a couple of them. Oceana got 3 of them. And they're all the same ships. The one I showed at the very first slide is the Tahitian Princess, and that was the sister ship of what became Azamara. They're beautiful little ships. All righty, well, thank you. We'll see you Tuesday at 2 o'clock.